The Mercury series anamorphics are Atlas's new kid on the block that are riddled with technical imperfections that are fused into a small metal housing that's chock full of lens design compromises. And I love them. So during NAB, my buddy Julian called me up and mentioned that he was gonna create a film for Atlas showcasing their new Mercury anamorphics. So we got the gang together to put these lenses through the ringer. These lenses are special because there aren't a ton of options available that cover large format anamorphic, and the Mercuries have a 1.5 times squeeze, which is also unique, so it's able to accommodate a variety of different sensors, including 16:9. When you throw it on a 16:9 sensor, you'll get a super wide 2.66 aspect ratio, which is one of the traditional widescreen ratios that was developed in the 50s and eventually reduced down to 2.35 to include an optical soundtrack. When you shoot open gate with a 3.2 sensor like an Alexa, you'll get a 2.25 aspect ratio, and with a 4x3 sensor, such as a Venice, you'll get a 2:1. The bokeh won't be as oval as a typical 2x squeeze, but these lenses still have plenty of character while retaining that true anamorphic quality. It's interesting quantifying why so many people love anamorphic, and I think it boils down to a few things. A typical 2x anamorphic is capturing twice the horizontal field of view, so you tend to shoot on longer focal lengths than you normally would on spherical lenses. This is interesting because we tend to compose our shots based on the horizontal field of view. So at the same camera to subject distance, you'll have less depth of field for any given focal length, which people usually attribute to a more pleasing image. Another unique anamorphic quality is the gradual change from objects that are in focus to objects that are out of focus. This cylindrical compression combined with a longer focal length are usually what some say is a more organic quality of anamorphic lenses. Today's sensors are so pristine that many of us are always trying to find different ways of capturing an imperfect image, and that's exactly what these lenses provide. I personally tend to stay away from most filtration, so optics are usually my first line of defense when defining the texture of a project. Before we get into it, if you're enjoying this video, consider checking out my Patreon, where I have exclusive behind-the-scenes content of my creative process as I work with crew and even watch the camera feed as we're lighting. There's also a bunch of other content from my professional work as a DP, such as lighting breakdowns, and a community Discord where you can better get in touch with me or the community. So one of the first things that I noticed about the Mercuries were their compact size. I shot with the Orions on a few projects, and I'm used to using Vista Primes, which are absolute chonkers. So operating lenses that are literally half the size is a very welcome attribute when it comes to shooting handheld or even mounting on a gimbal. The lenses themselves are beautiful, both inside and out. Most modern lenses are designed to hide imperfections, while the Mercury series embraces a lot of those vintage characteristics to give them a lot of unique character. A lot of times it felt like there was a magnet drawing my eyes towards the center of the frame, with the sort of swirly bokeh and super prominent barrel distortion, which means that the edges kind of bow out from the center. The opposite would be pincushion distortion, which bows the image towards the center and is usually found on a lot of telephoto lenses because of the disparity from the front and rear elements. Atlas went with barrel distortion because it's more akin to human vision, so most people end up preferring it as an imperfection. Because of this, I did find myself composing towards the center most of the time, as anything off to the sides of the frame kind of fell victim to the squeeze and distortion. The 72mm ended up being my favorite and looked the most normalized of the bunch, which makes sense because the horizontal field of view comes out to around 48mm. Another quality that I absolutely loved were the golden amber lens flares. I'm actually of the crowd that doesn't particularly care for the blue flares that you typically find on C-Series or Orions. It's definitely an iconic look, but sometimes feels a little overdone, which is why I absolutely fell in love with the kind of warmer amber flares. To me, the warmer color felt like a more organic flare as opposed to a huge blue streak running across the frame. But again, all these characteristics are just one of the many brushes we have available to us as creatives. The Mercury flares felt like it had so many layers and depth rather than a simple cheap streak that you'd find on a typical budget lens. Sam, what do you think?
I think it has the vivid color. This is not a hobby. Hobby is not, it's a side thing. I'm doing this for my entire life. It's not a hobby.
Big thanks to Atlas for letting us get our hands on the set and Julian for the collaboration. If you want to check out the final film, the link is down in the description. It's great seeing Atlas democratizing anamorphic lenses that are also being used at the highest level, such as movies like Babylon and my personal favorite, Everything Everywhere All at Once. I seriously could point these lenses at anything and it looked amazing. These puppies run for $8,000 per lens, which is pretty great considering your next option starts at $30,000 per lens.
I mean, come on.
The 1.5 times squeeze makes these lenses super adaptable for a variety of aspect ratios so that we don't have to be locked into a traditional scope ratio and gives us more creative freedom to visually tell our stories. They're creatively inspiring and technically imperfect, and that's exactly why you choose these lenses.